So welcome to the PRSA Career Coffee Ongoing Solo. My name is Eva Kaiser, and I am actually sitting in a bar in St. Louis, which is one of the benefits for me of being a solo, is that I can go with my family different places. This weekend, my son has a lacrosse tournament. So we're in St. Louis at a Hilton, and I'm in the bar because they've got breakfast in the other part of the lobby, and my son's sleeping. So for me, being solo is about having flexibility to have work-life balance. But I won't go into a lot of my stories, but as we wait, there's a poll up because we want to see, we've got a mix of people who are independent already, and we'll go from there. So the reason I came up with this topic was I myself am an independent, and I've been networking with other independents for 15, 16 years now. And I've learned from all of them. I mean, being an independent is just not a solo thing. It's more of a community. And I brought together a group of people. First off, it's Amy Spencer, and she's the founder and principal of Evo Communications. And we've met several times, and I've learned from her. And then there's Candy Wolf. She's founder of Wolf Olson Communications. And I've also tapped her for experience. And then there's my dear friend, Kathy McLean, who is full of energy all the time. And she inspires me when I get in my low spots and I need help and enthusiasm. I go to Kathy. And then there's Michael Walsh, who is kind of the guy in the group. The guys do represent a large number of people who are independents. And he brings the perspective of being in the corporate world, just as Amy does as well, and Candy. But all of us have unique experiences. What I want to do is have each of us tell our stories first, and I'm going to save my story for later in case you need it, because the four people we've got here have great stories already. So we'll start with Amy, kind of share her story. But before we go into that, some housekeeping items. We are recording this, and right now we're using the chat feature for any questions you may have. So if you've got questions as we go along, just jump in and chat. And then later on, we've got a lot of already solo people, independents, colleagues of mine. If they want to share their stories towards the end of the session, then we will open it up for them as well. But right now, everyone is on mute except for the panelists. So with that, Amy, let's hear your story.
Thanks, Eva. It's great to be here, guys. See some familiar faces and some new ones. Thanks for coming on a Friday morning. At Evo, I take really a personal approach to matching busy clients at mid-size and large companies with the right solo talent to fulfill their current corporate communication needs. And I also do a little bit of direct consulting as well. And so my story is, I started this about 4 years ago, and going solo was really on my career bucket list. It's not an official thing, but I always was like, I think I want to try being on my own sometime. And I am a planner, so I charted a course. That's just my way. I started doing different roles within corporate communications. I've been a journalist. I've been in an agency. I've been in publicity and media relations, internal communications, change management, corporate responsibility. I kept taking different roles, thinking one day I want to start my own business and I want to have a lot of range and feel comfortable in a lot of seats. Everybody takes their own approach. That one was making me feel pretty comfortable. And so it still was really hard for me. I was risk averse. I was not sure about whether would I have any clients? Would I make enough money? Could I make back the money I had been making? And so I was really circling around that. I was doing a lot of coffees on Fridays. I had a job. I wasn't really satisfied in my job. And I knew I needed to make a change. And then one day my company helped me make that change by eliminating my position, and I was off and running. It was time to push myself out of the nest. I had been preparing, and it was time really to fly. And I'm happy to say in 4 years, I feel I have been flying steadily and feeling great about it. And I don't see myself really in the future going back to a corporate job. This adventure, it truly is an adventure and an incredible development opportunity for myself as an individual, as a professional. It's been really, for me, there's nothing like it. There's no corporate moment where there's like, we'd like to send you to this conference or do this development thing. There's nothing that's as deep and as significant as trying to run something all yourself. And there's just, you can't take that away from me. And it's something that has grown me in huge ways. So also I get to help clients now stretch and grow in their roles. And I get to help solos find their way out of the nest, sometimes helping them right from their corporate role into being a solo, and sometimes just giving tips like today. So today is truly, for me, a pleasure and a gift. So thank you, Ava, for inviting me, just to offer what I can, because I think we have a beautiful community here in Minnesota and beyond, but this local community is really special, and I'm just very honored to be a part of it.
Just to elaborate a little bit on your journey, Amy, what you have developed is kind of a collaborative where you bring in solos to help on projects. So you become a virtual agency. That's why I thought it was important that you were on the panel, because during my journey, so far I've jumped on with collaborated with many other different solo people to create projects. And that's kind of where the name of my company comes from, the plural I, because I'm an independent, which is the I in the plural I, and the plural means I can work with other people. And sometimes I expand my business to where I'm bringing in other independents to help me with projects, and sometimes it's just me. And so could you just explain a little bit about your business setup?
Yeah, I know, Ava, when I met you, I felt that connection, that we do similar things in a slightly different way, but it's not, I definitely, sometimes I play the role of a fractional head of communications. I have a client that is completely outsourced their communications function to Evo, and I work on that with a set of solos that are really specialty in media relations, social media, community relations needs, and that's been a lot of fun. More and more, I am working with really busy corporate clients who kind of are the people who call me up and say, I've got 10 minutes, this is what I need. Can you help me find that person? And I really work as like a matchmaker. And that's actually something that brings me a lot of joy, like to get that assignment, to really think through the network that I've built that continues to grow. And you're welcome to be a part of it. If it's of interest to you, send me something in LinkedIn or in my email. But I really work to create a really custom set of connections, really listen to that client and what do they need, and try to find the talent that matches that. And when it works, it's for me, it's like that magical moment that gives me energy for the next one. So it's one of the reasons why I love doing what I'm doing. And so that's what it looks like.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to jump to Candy, who I know has been in the corporate world, the agency. First I knew you in the agency world, then you were in the corporate world, and now you're an independent. So what's your story?
I've been through it all. Actually started in the corporate world working with United Health Group. Kind of started big, and then some mentor great advice was, get some agency experience. So I did that. So yeah, I've been in corporate, agency, and nonprofit, and been in the business for more than 25 years. Similar to kind of what Amy had talked about. Because I've been in the industry so long, I'd also heard from a lot of professionals over the years, who'd been solo. So in the back of my mind, I was like, well, that's just what happens. Sooner or later, everybody becomes solo. That's just kind of part of a career progression. And so I'd always had that in the back of my mind. And then back in 2014, I had a job loss, and it really led me to, again, I do that internal thinking and say, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to do something different? And this idea of being solo someday had already been in my head. And because it was tucked away, it just kept saying, maybe someday is now. And that's kind of how I got started. And I wouldn't say that I leapt into it. I'd say that I put a toe in the water and, kind of wanted to see how it was going. I talked with a lot of people when I started. My thought was always, I too, I heard Amy say risk averse, and, there were some big thoughts of like, can I do this? And again, I thought, what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, if I fail, I can always look for another job. You know, I can always go back to corporate or, you know, something like that. And I thought that feels okay. I can do that. And I thought if I don't enjoy it, I can move on. And 7 years later, I'm still here, and I'm going strong. And so one of the things that as I got involved, you know, with founding Wolf Olson Communications was, you know, really digging in. You know, I mean, I had some of the things you need right off the bat, but look to really grow my business, kind of keeping it like right now, I'm just what I would say truly solo. Like Eva, you talked about you sometimes work with subcontractors and whatnot. I haven't done that yet. I've kind of purposely kept my things small. It's not that I'm not open to working with others, but right now, kind of just being me fits my work model. So, but my focus has really been on the full integrated communications platform. So I can jump into internal communications, I can do marketing communications, and I really love my sweet spot's healthcare. Really love that as well. Oh, and I also currently serve as the ethics officer for Minnesota PRSA. I'll make a plug for that.
Thank you. So you talked about being kind of risk adverse. I'll share this one story with you. Back in the day, I took my APR exam. At that time, it was an oral presentation. You had to defend yourself. And I was in an agency, a big agency, and I was happy and I couldn't see another life at all. And one of the questions they asked me was, what would you do if you went solo? How would you feed your family? And I was like, I would never, ever, ever go solo. But if I did, I wouldn't steal any clients from my current company, and I'd just be, you know, I'd be good. And I think that was foretelling my future. Not that I steal clients from anybody, but at that point in my career, I was like, there's no way I would ever go solo because I was so fearful of finding clients. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but unlike you all, I didn't plan it from when I first started that I wanted to ever go solo because that was the biggest fear of mine. And I got over that fear. And I think that's the leap that you mentioned that's so important to take. So Kathy, what's your story?
Well, it's actually a perfect segue.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise. So I don't know if this is going to reflect well on me, but I was in a marketing communications track. I was a director of and my background is agency, kind of ad agency. And I was just happily doing what I was doing. I just wasn't even aware of the potential of being a solopreneur, which is the phrase I use, or being a contractor. It just wasn't even on my radar. And I ended up having a career transition a little bit, as everybody else has mentioned as well. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work out, it was kind of a gap plan. And I fell into some project work during my gap. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And then another project followed. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And I got about 6 months into it. And I was still working on the full-time gig. And I was like, why am I doing that? It was going really well. The project work was absolutely filling my bucket. I was having so much fun. I was getting to do what I love to do. I was getting recognized for being good at it. So I went about 6 months into it. I said, and that was when I started to ask people about what's this whole solo thing. And I met a lot of you. So fun to see so many faces and names. You guys helped talk me over the cliff, which was a beautiful thing. And I've never looked back. I just didn't even know it was an option for me. And it's just worked out really, really well for where I am in my career. So I'm an independent. I do a little bit I do a fair amount of collaboration, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about with many of you here on the call. But I also kind of do my own thing. I do both a lot of strategic planning with clients, and then I do what I call program or project management where needed. I have some, little clients and nonprofits who I adore. And I've got some, pretty big corporate and kind of global corporations that I work with. So I just love it. No one told me it would be so much fun. Yes, a little stressful, Yes, a little nervous making. Like again, March of what 2000 or 2019 was like really stressful making. But it's always worked out, and partially because of this community. So
Thank you, Kathy. I think for me, I've tried a little bit of everything on the independent side. I've had like an Amy Spencer kind of thing going on. I've been just myself. I've also tried the contracting gig. And I think that for me, being an independent gives me the flexibility to work with clients that I like. When I left to become an independent, I was working with clients who were not nice to me and who were not, how should I say, made me feel icky to work for them. One of them was actually a company that did the Adomicizer, the infomercial for like do your abs with the little muscle stimulants, and it just made me feel kind of creepy. And I was like, no, I want to work with clients who I like, generally enjoy talking to every day, and who treat me with respect. And so I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy it. So Michael, what about you? You made the corporate leak, what, 3 years ago and 4 years ago?
Coming on 4
Well,
years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good to see a lot of familiar faces here. So my story is similar to the other panelists, a little different in one way. So I also have been in the PR communications world for 25 years. I have a big stint in nonprofit. I worked at the Wilder Foundation for about 8 years, and then I went to higher education, really tech, at Capella University for 9 years. And then I spent several years prior to going solo I was the head of communications, PR and communications, both internal and external, for a US bank, particularly the consumer bank and wealth management. So I've got this mix of corporate, nonprofit, huge company, more startup mentality. And when I decided to go solo, it's a little different than some stories. So I was not in transition. I was not laid off or anything like that. And it was helpful because I had been thinking, kind of planning for launching my own thing for probably 10 years. Now, does it take that long? For those of you who haven't done it yet, no, it doesn't need to take 10 years. But I was in a good position where I had a good job. I had just gotten promoted, and I made the decision to leave to do this on my own terms. Was it still angsty? God, yes. But I think if there's two phrases or words for those of you who are new to this or haven't done it yet to take away from this conversation is, what's the worst that could happen? I love the fact that at least two of us have said that phrase. I actually I think it was either wrote or I did a video a while ago on exactly that topic. I think that was the name of the piece. What's the worst that can happen? Now, if we were telling you all to take out a $10 million loan from a bank to start a brewery or something like that, you've got a lot more skin in the game. But for most of us, if you're in a sort of a place in your life where you have the experience, you have the financial stability to give this a shot, maybe you have a partner or spouse in your life, really ask yourself, like, what is the worst that could happen? I stopped asking myself that after 4 years because I'm in a pretty good place now. But for the first year or so, I had asked myself that every day. And the answer is, well, you'll just get another job, right? It could take a little time, but I mean that, the fear of the unknown can get out of whack. But the benefits of it all, in terms of why, the question is why, right? Some of us we're somewhat forced into it, and maybe we lost a job, we're in transition, but ultimately we could work for somebody else. And the why for me, it doesn't come down to money. It doesn't come down to, necessarily building a large agency or anything like that. It's all about flexibility. That is, so many workplaces talk about work-life balance. I mean, every workplace talks about work-life balance. And my experience is, and sadly, in the majority of them, it's just a phrase they use, and there is none. They say it, or there's just very minimal. As a solo, again, you work hard, and there's not stresses, but you have more control, in my opinion, over that spigot of work. You have more control over that work-life balance. Nothing's ever perfect, but that is the appeal. That's why I did it.
I'm going to share a little story here. So before I went solo, I was all about my job. I was probably flying 4 times a month. And I would have a little book that I had from the same book twice. So I had a book in my suitcase that I could read to my son as he looked at the book at home over the phone. And so I was on the plane yesterday with my son, and we were way, 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 way back. And when I used to fly, I would get upgraded to first class all the time. And I just remember I just kind of burned myself out. I didn't feel like I was connecting with my kids. And so for me, the switch was I put my career to be local and be with my kids, and my husband switched to a career, took a new job where he traveled more. So for really, it was a balance there because I just wasn't spending enough time with my kids. And they got to the point where it was like, who's taking them where and how do you get them there? And knowing what's happening in their lives, if you're working all the time, was tough for me. So for me, it was the flexibility. Also working with clients I liked. But now I get to, take them places and be there for them. And I know you, Mike, you talked about how you every day are walking your kids to the bus stop. And you're that dad, you block out your calendar, and that's the flexibility you wanted in your life.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a gift. I mean, I never would take my kids to the bus stop ever when I was in corporate America, and now I do it the vast majority of the time, and if not, pick them up. And that's, comes down to what are we here for? What's our life all about, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's about your company, God help you. It's there's got to be that balance. Yeah.
And on a side note, so I made the switch and I became a solo, and then my husband had a serious brain injury and he was out of work for 6 months. If I had been at a corporation or agency, that would have been really difficult to handle, being able to take care of my husband and my kids and a full-time job. I probably would have had to go on some leave. It would have been really tough. So being a solo, I could still manage that in a way that made it work for my family. But now you saw
Ava,
me. Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just going to add, so that is an important, I think a really important thing when we're talking about the Great Resignation, we're talking about mental health, a pandemic, all the stresses. And Ava, that must have been really an incredible stress on your family, what you're sharing. In my family, we had a house fire during the pandemic and we're kicked out of our house for a year. I lived in a rental house with my family suddenly. And I have thanked my lucky stars that I'm a solo because I was thinking about the kind of hamster wheel life I was living in the corporate world. And if it was really busy at work and that had happened and we had a pandemic and my kids were struggling, like, I don't even know how I would have survived that. I mean, we barely survived anyway, I'll be honest, with this last year, but we're on the other side of it now. And I think one of the saving graces was being able to turn that spigot up or down, like Michael was saying, to balance our lives and figure out how we're going to do this together as a family and come out on the other side of it. So the good news is I'm here in my rebuilt house and things are starting to feel a little bit more normal, but just examples of all of us probably have them. Extra stresses that come on your life, and sometimes corporate roles or just jobs they're not on the same cycle. They can't be on the same cycle. And it's really a gift to be able to make some adjustments, turn it up when you need to, turn it back when you need to.
Thank you. It's not that I planned my husband's injury, but the flexibility that was there was very helpful for me. So when I was speaking, I kind of mixed between solo, independent. I know that I never call myself a freelancer because freelancer to me means that you're just in it for a short time. But what do you all call yourselves? I call myself an independent.
I say
solopreneur.
I say consultant.
For me, it depends on who I'm talking to, but I've used consultant, independent contractor, solopreneur pretty interchangeably, but I agree, never freelancer, because my experience, those people who come calling to me, it's using the term freelancer, want somebody for $25 an hour, and I'm not going there. So.
Yeah, I mean, you want to position yourself as, at least I do, and I think most of us do, as more of that strategic. Again, I use the word consultant, but that strategic partner. I think of a freelancer more as a just, here's one thing, go do it. Almost much more tactical. But I think it's important to position yourself as that more senior strategic partner that can execute on things, on their needs, but also give them that broader picture, that broader understanding of what's available to them and potential solutions. And you've got to, it's all about how you frame yourself.
I like solo. I like independent consultant. Those are terms I probably lean to, but I'm with Candy. Like sometimes the way I talk about it depends on the audience that I'm speaking with and how I think they'll take that in.
So one of the big things about being an independent was, how do you name yourself? You don't want to be a freelancer. It's how do you position yourself? For me, when I made the move, I wanted to make sure that I was seen not as somebody who's just doing it for a short time. And I wanted it to be bigger than just me, if possible. And I had the advice from someone saying, don't name it yourself, your own name, because then you're limited. So I came up with the plural I, and I explained kind of it's plural independence and myself. But also there's a story behind it that I wanted to create a tribe, and tribes are not just about, there's no I in tribe. There is an I in tribe, which means unlike the team, it's tribe, and you can be independent and be yourself. And so that's kind of why I wanted to go with a different name. So mine's the plural I, because it wanted to be my name. But Candy, you went with Olson Wolf Communications. What was that rationale?
Because Olson is my married name, and yeah, I went for the path of least resistance when I started. I had entertained the idea of having, a more branded name like you, and I don't know. I just kind of thought, let's just go with Wolf Olson. I think I looked at Wolf Communications, and somebody already had that somewhere, which is why I went with Wolf Olson. Plus, to be honest, I thought that sounded kind of bigger. It sounded like sounded like an agency, or like a full agency. And I've had people say that. They're like, oh, well, who's Olson? It's like, well, because I go professionally by just Candy Wolf. So that's kind of how that came about. But I would agree that I think for those people who definitely know that you want to grow your business into kind of a larger model, for sure. Yeah, I would go beyond naming it after yourself.
So Amy, you went with Evo. I don't know where Evo came from.
Well, it came from a couple places. So one, I, as an individual, had kind of developed a specialty in my corporate life of evolving a practice of communications inside of the business, maybe starting a new niche of support within corporate communications that the company hadn't done before, and building that into something that was sustainable. And I did that like 3 times, and I found that I loved doing that kind of work. So that was about, how can I help other companies evolve what they're doing, or start something new, maybe when they don't have headcount yet and they know they need it, but they could start it with someone outside, and then eventually maybe that would become headcount, and I could help them find the right person and then move on to the next thing. And then we do a lot of, change is so inherent in all the work we do in communications that a lot of times when we're connecting, or I'm putting a consultant in a role, it's for something that has to do with a major change. So Evo is about evolving that. And I did trademark it, because there's a lot of places where the name Evo is in it. I actually feel like it manifests itself once you name yourself that company. I can name several other things that are Evo, and I realized, wow, I picked a name that maybe if I want to have the communications Evo, I'm going to need to trademark it. So I went ahead and did that, but it's not necessarily something that people need to do. I just felt, because of what I chose, it was a necessary thing for me to keep that mine.
I trademarked mine as well.
Yeah.
So Kathy and Michael, you have long, yours, Kathy's is a little different, and Michael is your name.
Yeah, I mean, I debated this, for a long time before I launched, and I still debated, and ultimately I went with my name because, and I think it has served me well. I went with my name because I knew the clients I was going to get are people who know me, right? It's your inner set, circle of connections. It's people you've worked with. It's people who know you. And that has absolutely proven to be true, at least for me. The 99.9% of clients I've gotten are either people I've known or referrals from people I know. So I thought, well, why don't I just go with the brand I've already built for myself? But it's an important thing to consider, because if your end goal is to be much bigger than you, if you want to build a little mini agency or a big agency, you might want to go with a name that is not just you.
Yeah, and that's so mine is Kathy Connects, and I knew I never wanted to be an agency per se. I was fine. Again, my equity was in my name, and actually I'm kind of watching the chat. I'm a networking junkie, as many of you on the call know, and I love connecting. I love connecting people. I love connecting, and then my business tagline is connecting ideas to results. It's one of the things I'm really good at. So I just, I confess, I've always, especially now, I feel a little guilty. I wish I'd spent a little bit more time on my company name, but it works. It works for me. Oh, I know. A big piece of it was actually my social handle that I used before I went out on my own. So it was this really seamless transition. So whether or not it's the best name in the world, I don't know, but it has stood me well. So
Okay, so on this, the poll that's up, it says most people with the fear of income and fear of finding clients was what held you back. And I can say that for myself. That was my thing. I'm an introvert. You wouldn't believe it, but I'm an introvert. And for me, finding clients, it was my fear. But I found out since I've been doing this for 12 years now, that I rarely get clients that aren't referrals. It's all about networking, and it's a very collegial group where someone's just too busy, they forward it on. Or I've got one client who have gone through 3 different companies with him. Every time he moves, he brings me along, and then I meet new people there. So that's kind of really nice. And I had a website, and then I paid somebody to put a new website up. I never wrote the copy, so I'm still waiting to do that. A lot of things are LinkedIn, but I think for me, it's always been networking and people who know me. And letting people know what I work on. So one of the biggest things, the advice that I got when I started was make sure people know what your niche is. What is it that you want to work on? My niche is business to business communications, technology, manufacturing, and professional services. I dabble a little bit in consumer, but I don't want to do consumer packaged goods. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to just do media relations. I want to also do strategy. So I want to go into a company. So my sweet spot is small to mid-size. I want to go in and make an impact. I want to be able to say, hey, you should do this, this, or this. You should start an advising group. You should do this or this. Mm-hmm. So I want to look at my role as helping a company more than just doing a news release. So figuring out what you want to do, what you love to do is important as well when you position yourself as an independent. So Kathy, you're shaking your head yes. How do you get new business? Where are you finding it?
And I'm shaking my head yes, also because it makes it a lot easier. I saw again on the poll, again, the concern about income. We've all been there, we've done that. And I would say a big piece that's connected to the flexibility discussion point we had earlier. It's about planning ahead, putting aside money for the rainy day, putting aside some money, thinking through a business plan that allows you to make some of those changes, and then actually takes the stress off of out of that income question. I don't know about the rest of my panelists colleagues here, but again, I always look at, I look at a year, but I'm also looking at quarterly. Again, what do I got coming? Anyways, managing all that, knowing what you love to do and are good at is critical. You cannot be all things to all people. It will not work. You won't enjoy it. You won't do a good job. And the chance it'll take much longer to be successful. So to Eva's point, if going after what you love, articulating that and letting that again be the core of your brand leads to success, then which leads to a little bit of business planning to surround that. Again, the income and the client question is not as bad as you think.
I would also say that there's a tendency to really be thirsty and desperate sometimes. We're like, oh, I'll take anybody who comes along. And kind of, I did that at the very beginning. That was a mistake. And I lowered my value and sold myself a little cheaper than I should have. And I didn't enjoy the work. And I will never do book publicity ever again. Don't ever send me book publicity leads. I don't want them. But also know what your value is before you start. And that will help you find the clients that will value you. Because if you're going at the lowest price possible to get something, it's not going to work.
Hey, Ava, if I can I'm watching the chat and can I comment on something here? So I feel like I could maybe offer somewhat of a unique perspective. There's the question about, should I have a website or how important is that? And I do remember I felt it was really important when I started that I get that website going, but I actually would change that if I was going to start now. What I see is, I think that you can start with really working on your LinkedIn. If you know you're going to be solo and just yourself, make that LinkedIn shine. It's already your website. You can just add things to it. It's already working. That's how people are finding you. If you have a website or you want to have a website, Kathy's giving it a thumbs up.
Yeah, so
then, and I see If you want to have a website, great. I think that, a simple one-page scroll website that is out there right now can be enough, but then make that really prominent on your LinkedIn so that when you go to the LinkedIn, you can see I should click out to your website. I'm going to find more there. Sometimes as somebody, I'm saying what's unique is that I'm actually looking at a lot of LinkedIn people's profiles because I'm often looking to match a solo with a client who needs a certain thing. And so I'm shopping your LinkedIn pages. And what I notice is that sometimes the LinkedIn page really isn't complete. They've started being a solo, but maybe they haven't even added their business yet. Go ahead and add it right away and put some stuff under it. So I know, what do you think you want to be? Even if you're not even being it yet, tell me what you want to be doing. And then, make sure that I can find the website, because sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, well, maybe you looked at my website, and it's like, well, no, I was all over your LinkedIn page, but I couldn't even find where I could get to your website. So just a couple of experiences I've had and things that maybe can think about in terms of how does that appear for yourself.
I want to back up Amy on that. I do have a website, but it is at the bottom of my priority list in terms of marketing myself and branding myself and connecting. LinkedIn is everything, in my opinion, in what we do. I think you do need to have a website just to show you're legit. It doesn't need to be robust. It could just be a page, just to have some sort of presence that shows people you're real. Because in my experience, if you look like you're kind of half in, you're kind of doing it, but you're just doing it until you get a job, and you're just like, your LinkedIn profile doesn't say you have your own practice, and it's just like, it's sort of wishy-washy, or it doesn't look like you're all in. Clients are going to smell that, or, they're like, well, I need somebody who's going to be there with me for a year or 2 or 3. I want to put this person on retainer. So you kind of want to go big in a way, but going big doesn't mean spending $30,000 on a website. It's really going big in terms of making your LinkedIn presence really your new role. And of course, networking aggressively before you go out and after, certainly in the first 60 months to a year. But yeah, a website, I think you need to have one, but I wouldn't make that your priority. That, make it simple, get Squarespace or Wix or Weebly or something. Get some sort of presence, but just make it simple. And yeah.
For me, I think the most important thing was this pre-COVID. It was having a car and having a gift card to get coffee, because it was all about networking, connecting with people and talking to people and saying, hey, can you help me? Do you know somebody? At one point when I first started, I went to a client of mine who was in professional services. And I said, can you give me 5 people that you think I can help? And from those 5 people, connections, Agore started. I just got to know a lot of people, a lot of different industries, and maybe they didn't work for me, it didn't work out, but they knew who I was, and then they shared my name with other people. So it's kind of that, just networking is really the key to getting started. And also for me, I like to cycle my business load, my workload, based on my kids' activities. So the summer, I really like to slow it down a little bit, so I can then use that time to network in the summer, and then ramp the work back up. But it's always about planning a little bit and knowing what you want to do. So, Candy, how do you get new business?
Similar to what others have said. I thought in the beginning that, oh yeah, I need a website. So I had somebody help do a website right off the bat. But it really has been word of mouth and referrals, and every client that I've had has come in that way. Like, I've had some prospects who've come to me from different areas, but it wasn't always, like a fit. They just didn't come to be clients. But networking, I would say, as others have said with the website, I eventually switched my website to a Weebly site, which was something I could do on my own, just so I had an additional presence outside of LinkedIn, which I do think also is very, very helpful. I did try doing an email newsletter for a while. I got really great feedback from fellow professionals. It didn't necessarily lead to anything. Sometimes I wish I'd kept it up. But for me, I've just really focused on the networking to get referrals.
I did really enjoy your newsletter, and it was something I aspired to have myself, but never got to it. There's a lot of things client work always comes first before me doing my own branding, which is kind of a sad thing. But I think there's also a list of making things you want to accomplish with your brand. And LinkedIn is where I put all my time right now. It's just easier for me to do. But when I started, I want to answer some of the questions here. When I started out as an independent, I was encouraged to get a lawyer to set up an LLC. And then I also trademarked my name. I'm lucky because my husband has health insurance, so that's something I deal with. And then getting an accountant was also something that was encouraged for me to do. So the questions from the group is lawyers, accountants, how do you handle the business side of it?
So I'll jump in. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's sort of a mini checklist, right? Before you launch or shortly after, sort of these things you need to do. So I think creating an LLC, if that's the sort of business function you want to do, I did that years ago. I didn't use a lawyer. I mean, you can create the Minnesota Secretary of State site and do it it's a pretty seamless process. I mean, if you have a lawyer, great. So I do not have a business lawyer. Thankfully, I haven't needed one. But I think it is important to create a business entity, such as an LLC. And the Minnesota Secretary of State site can guide you through that. You certainly need a business checking account, at least I believe you do, to manage your finances and keep it clean and separate from your personal income. Mm-hmm. In terms of an accountant, I have a tax accountant because my wife owns her own business too. My wife owns a music school, which is fun. So between having two independent run businesses, our taxes just get kind of crazy. So I do have an accountant, but it's if it was just my business, I don't know if I would. But I do agree having an LLC and creating a business checking account, if you haven't done so already, are two kind of low hanging, and they're easy. It takes, you do it one time and you're good to go.
I agree with the accountant piece. I would die without my accountant. I don't understand tax implications. And so that's why I tend to advise people, if you invest any time or energy in a professional to set up yourself professionally, a good accountant is, I think, really, really critical, really helpful. And it just helps as tax laws change in this space. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I was really lucky. One of my former colleagues from my corporate days, she's a CPA. And so I use her for my accounting. And so I really, really trust her. She does my taxes. She is able to, tell me what my estimated quarterly taxes will be, because that's something also you need to think about as a solo, is that you've got to pay those, the estimated taxes each quarter. I haven't used a lawyer. For contracts, there's a lot of great resources where you can get, some basic contract templates and things like that right off the bat. And definitely, I think if you're even considering going solo, and if you've thought kind of about a name, start your business, make it legal through the state. I think it's only $50, still. So it's very affordable. Do it, while you still map out some of the other pieces of your business as well. Definitely agree about having separate business, like a business bank account for this. I think that's essential to really keep as much of your business and your personal things separate, because as you set up your business, I think that was one of the things that for me, and again, this is all pre-pandemic, but trying to separate the two, like sometimes it'd be like, oh, it's 8:00 at night and I'm still working just because I'm at home and that's where my computer is. And I think because of the pandemic now, everybody's been in that type of environment, but I would still recommend keeping things separate. You need to have some separate aspects of your life, even though a lot of it's going to be at home, unless you choose to have an office outside of that.
Well, I would just add on the lawyer piece, I think it's good to have someone, if you don't have a person that's kind of your go-to partner, know who you would go to, because sometimes you get that cool opportunity that comes your way, and then the contract comes from the client and it comes to you and you read it and you're like, this is different than most of the ones I read, and I don't even know what that thing means. And I think we have to watch out for ourselves and make sure. And then that's the kind of time when it's good to know who you would call and say, could you just look through this contract for me and let me know if there's anything I need to redline and return back to this client before I sign it.
So there's lots of questions on chat, kind of the finance part of it. But so I personally, if tracking time, I use a software called Function Fox, and that allows me to add people if I bring in contractors to my billing, and then I can just run it out at the end. For me, at the very beginning, I really wanted 10 years ago to look legit, that I was in this for the long haul. So that's why my name is LaPointe, but also I found it important to have an office space because I wanted to actually say, here's my office. I'm a real entity. I'm into it. And then I got rid of it pre-pandemic and towards the end because I just wasn't even going there because I was going to coffee shops. But I think today there's more of an opening for people not to have an office and to just work from home because people are doing it. It's regular now. But in terms of billing, my rate, I initially thought my rate should be what my rate was when I was at an agency, but I've adjusted that now. And if anyone feels comfortable sharing their rates, we can do that in the chat, but I'm not going to ask the panelists to do that. But I would like to ask the panelists, what's some lessons learned? I mean, mine was I don't need an office the whole time. And an accountant's really good because I got audited, so that's not something I want anybody else to do. Having an accountant help with that. But what advice or lessons have you learned as you've gone through this adventure?
Well, I have kind of a funny story in terms of rates, right? So for my first advice is don't sell yourself short. I mean, if you go with too low of a rate, maybe you're new to this practice, you're not sure. If you go too low, you're not going to be seen as credible. Your rate represents your value. So I encourage people to go on the higher end and do a little research in the markets you serve and the industries you serve to see what others charge, and don't sell yourself short. Go a little higher because you can always come down. It's a lot harder to go up. And as an example of that, so I serve a lot of wealth management firms, investment firms, private banks, because for several years before I went solo, I was the head of communications for US Bank. So when I first started out, so I have clients all over the country, but of course I have a lot that, cities like Chicago or New York or San Francisco where, hedge funds and these boutique investment firms are. An early day, so I had what I would say is a fair, respectable rate for the Twin Cities, but I was talking to a prospective client on Wall Street. And he said, this sounds great. You sound like you know this industry well. He goes, what's your rate? And I told him, and he started laughing. And he said, that's cute. He actually said it was cute because it was so much less than these boutique Wall Street financial PR firms, right? So I took that as a lesson. So now my rate changes depending on the geography, depending on the business, depending on how much I really want to work for them. So I don't have a published rate. I don't have one rate. I have a range of rates depending on all those things.
Yeah, Kathy, I'm the same way. It depends. Again, some of my nonprofit clients, they can't afford my corporate rate. And so, and I want to work with them. So I adjust based on the client. Sometimes I'll ask them again what their budget is and just to see if I can work that out. Again, and actually when I'm watching the chat too about accountants, and again, I don't have a recommendation. I wish I did, but this is where, again, an accountant could be helpful because I make mine crazy because I do tend to have a lot of different rates based on my client and my projects. But again, I love being able to do that. It just is a little bit of a accounting nightmare, but it's kind of what the market will bear, just as we all experienced, when we in our other jobs. So
yeah, I think when it comes to hourly rates, I mean, absolutely, you need to know what you're worth, kind of like, well, what were you getting paid, in the corporate world, for example, if that's where you've been, and then think about, all the things that if you're going to go solo, you have to pay for all those things yourself, so you need to cover all of your expenses and make money, like I like what I do, but I'm also here to make money off of it. The one thing too that I was going to note, I saw in the comments, somebody had the PETA client surcharge. I like to call that convenience fee. So when I've had clients, call me on a Friday and they want something by Monday, I let them know that, I can do that, but there will be a convenience fee of, because it's just going to take me more time to do that over the weekend, and I want to be there for them, but there is going to be an additional charge. And I think you need to be, as others have said, you can have kind of like, okay, this is going to be my hourly rate, this is going to be my project rate, but you got to be flexible and fluid enough to say, you know what, that's going to take me more time, that's going to take my personal time, that's going to, whatever that might be. Or, and as Kathy noted, if you want to work with some nonprofits, you're probably going to need to be a little lower, have like a nonprofit rate in addition to that. So think about the flexibility of what you want with that. I think that's important.
So one of the lessons I learned it the really hard way, has to do with technology. I'm not a technology person, and that's my downfall. So the Geek Squad's always been helpful. But I've had a time when I lost my computer and I didn't have a backup for a week. So I would always encourage you to have a backup form of communication, a backup computer, no matter how old it is, around. I also had everything on an external hard drive, and that hard drive died and I lost everything that was on my hard drive. So now I encourage everyone to use Google Docs as much as possible for really important things. I tried to get the things back from my hard drive, but it was going to be, the first 3 levels failed at Micro Center. And so the final level was to pay $3,000 in advance to send it out with the odds that maybe it would have worked. So I'm still debating whether to do that because they had family photographs on it. But from technology standpoint, as a solo, you live by your computer. So make sure you've got some backup there, because if it goes down and you're out a week, it really, really, really sucks. An iPad just doesn't do it all the time. And then have some technology otherwise. Does anybody else have any technology advice?
I lost my computer in the fire I mentioned, and I went out and bought a new one at Best Buy the next day. I'm thankful that everything I do is up in the cloud. I lost nothing and I was right back in business. And I think it's an important thing that everyone should consider, because you just never know what can happen.
And I think redundancy is among the clouds. So I'm being hyper cautious, but I upload everything I have to 2 different clouds. Okay.
Wow.
In case the Google data center goes down, which it won't, but so I'm not, my computer could die right now and all my stuff is in more than one location.
Yeah, I'm the same way, combo. I do use OneDrive, and at the end of every year, I actually put everything on a hard drive. Again, including my bank accounts, because again, remember that we can't necessarily rely on our vendors to have the documentation you might need for an audit and things like that. So my redundancy is, I agree. Again, OneDrive is where I live, and then once a year I back everything up on a hard drive. And that has, again, I've also had, you will have a computer fail. I think it's almost a given. So just make sure to plan for that.
Yeah, I use an external hard drive. I do that monthly. I update everything, but it is a good reminder to use the cloud to back everything up as well, because that's something that I probably don't do enough of.
Well, so for me, I also had all my class lectures, because I teach at the University of Minnesota, and so I couldn't find any of my class lectures. And I was like, oh, I got to create from scratch again. So my lessons learned, the cloud is now my friend. So we all talked about fear of this, fear of the unknown. How do you deal personally with the anxiety and sometimes the fear you have as being a solo? Like, what's your coping mechanism?
I get a monthly massage. I feel it's part of my healthcare plan. Okay. I carry a lot of my stress in my body, and not unique, but I wasn't doing it for a while. It seemed indulgent, but we have to take care of ourselves. And I feel like that's about making sure you are in balance. And just, whatever it is, I like to exercise. I make sure I get a massage. I try to take walks with my dog. My dog, I feel, he's rescuing me a lot of times in my day, just like he needs to go. And that fresh air, it's like a 3-time-a-day thing for me. And I believe even in cold winter air, like get out there and just walk for 15 minutes, come back and sit down. Your energy and your focus will improve from just doing things like that. And your stress will go down.
And I would add, over time, at least, hopefully, so I had a lot of fear, like anybody does doing this, of the unknown. When you first go out, number one, you have to give yourself enough time to build a business, right? It's not going to happen in 2 weeks or a month or 3 months or 6 months. I mean, it's going to be several months, if not a year or more, before you hit any sort of equilibrium where you're feeling good. So, you do have to manage that stress, whether like Amy's talking, going for a walk, or just letting the right, the left side of your mind take over the right, where like you're gonna be okay, right? You're, unless you've done something really foolish, like you've set yourself up where you're not going to lose your house in a month. You're not going to, you're going to make the right decisions, and just give yourself the space and time, because it takes, for those who haven't done it or considering it, it takes months and months and months, if not a year or more, to kind of get to a good place. But I also want to add, I do lots of, over the years, informational sort of interviews, calls of people who are considering this, or they're in a job transition and should I do this? And I think there's this fallacy out there. You're like, well, how do you deal with the insecurity, right, of being a solo? How do you deal with the insecurity of it all? Which is the implication is that in corporate America, you're secure. How many of you have been laid off from a job, or how many of you had colleagues laid off from a job? So I would argue in today's day and age that once you have your independent consultant practice up and running and have a number of clients, you're actually probably a lot more secure, again, just my opinion, than in corporate America, because the chances of all of my clients firing me on the same day and having me have no income at all are virtually none. But in corporate America, your head is always on the chopping block. You never know what's going to come. So this idea of you are safer, you're more secure in a corporate job, I would argue that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Adding off of that, I know when I started my business, I had a client right off the bat and things were going well. And I'm like, yeah, I got this. This was easier than I thought. And then, things fell off, and, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep things going? That anxiety of the unknown. And again, talking with a lot of folks, knowing the peaks and valleys that come. And now it's like, I can't count the number of times like client A may have slowed down. So like, that work has fallen off a bit. But then the next day, like client B comes along and says, hey, I need more of this. So, which is always more than made up for the work that, might have been slowed down. So really having faith that those things are coming, and like Michael said, do what you're doing, keep at it. You have to keep at it. And it is definitely going to take more than, a few months to get this going, and to be successful. And I also learned to deal with that anxiety is to really lean into my network. I think I heard somebody say earlier, I mean, I'm a solo, but I count everybody else who's a solo as a colleague. Even if I don't like directly subcontract with them, they're my network. They're that I heard Eva say, the tribe, you're looking for other people who are like you that I can go to and I can call and say, gosh, this, I'm not sure what to do about this. There are other people out there, and that's really helped me get through a lot of the anxiety of the unknown, is because somebody else has been through that, and they can help talk me off the ledge if I'm on that. Which thankfully hasn't happened for a while, but you need that up. You need that network.
So there's some conversation on the chat about how do you manage working at home with work at home. And so for me, when I started out, I was very much, I needed an office to go to because I could not work at home. I could just not focus. I could not, if the laundry was there, I knew I had to do it. And I'm not a cleaning person, but I started cleaning because I worked at home. So I got an office, and then the office was just a place for me to get away and just focus on work. And then I started going to coffee shops when I had to work. If I really had to work and I didn't want to be distracted, I would go to a coffee shop and work. And then the pandemic hit, and I had myself, my husband works at home already, and I had 2 kids, one in college and one in high school, working at home too. And I was relegated to the front hallway, people coming in and out. So it's very difficult for me to focus. And what I decided to say was that it's not the hours that I work at home. I'm not going 8 to 5. It's the number of hours that I work. So the hours could be at any time during the day. So I didn't have to focus on just working during the regular business hours. And so I tend to get a lot of work done, of my hours done on Sunday night when everyone's settled down for the other stuff. But it is a struggle to be able to work at home and not do house work. Does that make sense? Now, everyone else seems to work at home or have a home office. How do you manage that?
I think having a designated space where you do your work, and it takes a while. I mean, now I love working from home. Like the idea of commuting every day, you couldn't pay me enough. There's just no way. So I love it now. But it took. I get your point, Eva. It's like, well, I could go water the lawn. I could do the laundry. I could take a nap. To sort of resist those temptations. But after a while, at least for me, I got kind of in the swing of a quiet space in my house where my home office is, and I just crank, right? And I actually work, this is just me, but because at least once the kids went back to school, right? The pandemic was a whole different thing. But once kids go back to school and you have some quiet, I find myself able to work actually a lot harder because I don't have people walking by my cube and a conversation over here and blah, blah, blah. And I got to walk to a meeting. I can focus, right? So for me, it's actually, I'm able to work better, but it took time to kind of, it's kind of reacclimating to a new work environment. But yeah, having a dedicated space where there's not distractions definitely helps.
I want to kind of build off of something that both Candy and Michael just said too. The reality is, if that balance, you do have to kind of take ownership and figure out what's going to work for you, and then try to come up with a plan or a discipline. So again, I actually belong to a small mastermind group of other solos. I know actually IABC has similar options as well, but I use those guys to help keep me accountable on how I'm going to work and how do I again continue to do well at what I do, professional development. But also they're the ones that help with like, oh, I can't, the laundry, I got to go do it, like what you were saying, Eva. There are all sorts of tips and tricks out there. So ask for some help, ask for tips. I have, if you saw my computer right now, I have like 4 or 5 post-it notes. It tends to be a little bit post-it note of the month, but little things that help me get at whatever I'm struggling with, whether it's a quote, whether it's, again, in my mastermind group, we read different books. And again, are there books that are helpful with, again, dealing with some of the dynamics or developing new habits. It's not, it does take time, what Michael was saying, and ask for help, and there are experts out there, but you have to kind of come up with your own plan and then try to figure out ways to stick to it, or you'll just continue to wallow in the same challenges of, kids in the background, laundry on the table, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't have kids, so I can't speak to that, but I think you need to know what your strengths are. And like, I'm not a morning person. I told this to the panel before, making an exception before 8 a.m. For PRSA because I love it so much, but I don't tend to schedule, meetings at 8 a.m. or earlier because I just know that I'm not fresh. I'd much rather kind of start my day a little bit later, if I can. And obviously things come up and you do it, but I heard Amy say earlier too, taking the time to exercise. I make sure that I exercise right away in the morning. I was up early today, so I did that actually before the call and to get it done. And that's part of self-care and incorporating those types of personal things into your day and finding time for that. I think you find what works for you. You kind of know what works for you. Just maybe do more of that as you go solo. And you know what, if you need to do a load of laundry during the day, my gosh, just put it in, like I've always found myself to do that. Now, like I might only clean the kitchen on those days where I'm like really frustrated and really need an outlet to something like that. But that's also there for me. I've got the ability to do that. And so, again, I think you just lean into those things that work really well for you.
So there's a conversation on the chat about networking groups. There's the independent practitioners section within PRSA, but there's also in Minnesota a group called Solo PR Minnesota on Facebook, and that's a group started by Eric Hansen. It kind of brings together, it's invite only, but you just have to ask them for the invite. But it really brings together people. They share leads for new business leads and other things. They used to meet regularly, but I think the pandemic kind of messed that up. But that's a good group if you're interested in connecting with other solos in Minnesota. It's called Solo PR Minnesota.
Yeah, I do want to chime in and say that Eric didn't start it. It was actually put together years before by David Kostick, who's now retired. But if
did not know that.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Minnesota PRSA, he's a past president. So so Eric's one of the people who helped kind of, keep it going. But yeah, it's been around for a long time.
Okay. So for the people who are on the line still, if you want to share your story, just let us know and we'll give you a chance to share. Turn off your mic so you can talk. But while we wait for that, I want to go back to asking everybody, why do you stay solo? And kind of reiterate things that are also happening. So Candy, why do you stay solo?
I think I put this on the questions that you originally asked. I find joy again in the work that I do. You said it earlier, Eva, you had some clients where like the gut machine, the ad machine, if you don't, sometimes when you work in the corporate side or the agency side, you're doing things you might not necessarily like. I find that as a solo, I can do those things that I really love to do. And, again, I've heard this here this morning, but we'll echo it again. I think, yes, we've all taken on clients, especially as we started, that maybe it wasn't like the best fit, but as you grow in your business and you have more confidence to say, you know what, I don't like that. For me, I am media relations is not my thing. And so whenever somebody talks about, PR is media relations, I just cringe, because that is the one thing in particular that I farm out to people who do it all the time. Like I can write you a news release, absolutely, but following up with media, that's not my thing. So finding the joy in what I do and being successful at it. I mean, I said before, like when I started my business, the question was like, if I wasn't successful, I could leave it. I stay solo because I continue to be successful and I love it.
And I spent 20 years on the other side. We've all been on both sides, right? 20 years of not being solo, working for someone else, and now doing it for myself. I would flip that question. I often say to people, why would you choose to stay with corporate America? Where you don't have the flexibility, you don't have that variety of work, you don't have that sense of ownership of something you've built. Now, we can't have everybody in the world launching their own solos and then we'd all be working for each other. But to me, for me, it's been a no-brainer. The why is the flexibility and the freedom it's given me, and the variety of work, and the pride in what I've built is all so much more than, I was a vice president of a Fortune 200 company before I went solo, but the pride I feel now is far outweighs anything I accomplished in corporate America. And my wife said, even my wife, I didn't think I was that unhappy before, but she says the difference between who you are now and who you were 7 years ago is night and day, because I was just stressed out of my mind all of the time, and it just eats away at you.
Yeah, I think I stick with it because I don't really like anyone to be the boss of me. And while my clients, you could say I have numerous bosses, right? They're the people that hired you. Ultimately, we know we are in control of that partnership and whether it's one that we feel is one that should continue or not. And I would just say too, I agree. There's lots of reasons why it's great to be on your own, but it's not for everyone. But I do think for those that I get this chance to talk to so many people who are thinking about it or starting it or have been doing it and doing it for a long time, celebrating major anniversaries, as I know some people in this group have amazing anniversaries of being solo. The piece I would say is, I was given this advice, and I often say it to others. I know some of you have heard me say it to you, I think it's important to stick with it for 3 years. If you're really serious about it, stick with it for 3 years. It's not for everybody. Maybe you didn't like it after that and you go back, but the things that you're doing, the networking that you're doing, like the cycle it takes before someone who met you at a coffee then thinks of you and calls you for an opportunity, for example, like that can take a long time. And it could take a year or two before that moment comes. I've seen it happen. And so you're planting seeds and you need time for those seeds to sow. If you hop in and then you hop out, things that you put effort towards you might never realize because you didn't stick with it. And you might not really get to feel like I really did this. So you might do this and be like, okay, I did it. And now I know like it's not for me. But I think after 3 years, you'll have built something that can sustain you if you just keep working at it every day.
And I would add to that too, that again, that idea of a plan, and granted, I tend to love plans. I love strategic plans. But I found it incredibly helpful and very freeing to actually come up with my own little business plan, 1 page. Again, it was only mine. I wasn't graded on it. I didn't have to turn it into anyone. But by going through that plan and trying to figure out what did I want to accomplish this year, what might my business look like in the next year, how would I diversify my my income and things like that. That to me was enormously helpful, kind of building on what Amy said. And once I did it and you actually start to do the math, how much money do I want to make? How much work do I have to do that? There's lots of different ways to do the math. That was, and I put it up on my bulletin board, literally by my computer. And then as I'm out networking, I'm asking for the kind of work that I wanted. That's one of my big pieces of advice is ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And that's not always true, but ask for that, like, that's a really cool project. I'd love to work on that. Can I help you? Every time I would ask that question, they would be like, oh my gosh, that would be great. And thus kind of begins the flow. So I just want that plan idea. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be a plan with capital P, but it can be really freeing. Anybody on this call, I'm assuming, does strategic planning in some way, shape, or form. It's just do one for yourself. It's really fun.
So I want to jump in here and share some, it kind of triggered some advice for me here is, so I have a son who's got a little bit of anxiety and he's afraid to ask for anything. And I keep telling him, ask what's the worst thing that can happen. I mean, ask for business, ask for referrals. The worst thing that happens is they say no. And then you just ask somebody else. I think that the idea of asking is such great advice, Kathy.
And I've learned too, like everybody goes into this business in different ways, which is really wonderful. I honor all of those different models. From Michael saying like, I have a diversification, so I feel more stable that way, to people who take one project at a time. Maybe someone more like Candy, who can sink herself more deeply into a client, but may balance a few on the side. And then, you're doing that work that way. So, you say either you're diversified or put money away in those first couple of years, like, and if you get money, put it in the bank, seeing that bank account that I've saved in and knowing that that's my rainy day account, it takes a lot of that stress, of that financial stress down for me. And it's an important part, I think, of the formative years of your business, is just to really create that cushion for yourself. And so those are different ways of doing it, right? Diversification, having that nest egg, and then knowing like, what's the model that you want? Are you a hunter? Will you go find that business? Do you like to have connections to companies like mine, where I love that part? It's a thrill for me to network with people and define the work. Is part of what I've learned over time. I really love doing, so I'm doing more of it. And so for the solos who don't like to do that, I can be a great partner and sharing some opportunities that I'm finding. Everybody comes at it in a different way and can support this community and participate in their own way. And I think that's really cool. And you get to create what that is for you. And maybe you'll create something that didn't exist in our market that is something we needed and we didn't even know it.
And I just want to add that a lot of the questions I get about this from people are like, well, how much time do you spend doing business development, right? Do you spend 30% of your time, 50% of your time? And again, it's different for everybody. Some people do more or less, but in my experience is when you first go out, it's 100%. But over time, as you build your, and this is important to understand, as you always want to be doing business development. That can never stop, right? Just like networking never stops. But I don't spend anywhere near 30% or 50%. It's far less because I have a full roster of clients. I want to keep my name out there and keep having conversations, but I am not really welcoming a lot of, I cherry pick my business now, which is a great place to be. But this idea that you're forever going to be spending half of your time, again, some people might, but for a lot of us, once you build up your client roster and you're where you want to be, again, you got to, it doesn't demand that, the majority of your time. And again, depending on the model you have, you don't necessarily need, again, if you're a solo practitioner and it's just you, I would argue you don't need or want, or you should have 30 different clients, right? You'd go at any given time, you'd go insane, right? For me, I have, 3 to 5 core sort of retainer clients. And then I have this orbit of maybe a dozen or more other clients that kind of come in and out, but you don't need or want to have, many, many, many clients at any one time if you're truly a solo practitioner, because you'd go insane, right? If you could have 3 to 5 really good, solid ones that are sort of there continuously, you're great.
So for me, I think I felt more pressure to do new business when I was an agency than I do as an independent, because I'm not feeding the whole agency. I'm just feeding myself. And to the one question that came up is, how do you say no? Well, it's easier to say no when you can say, here's my parameters of how much time I have to work, or one things I'm interested in. I've had a client come and they're like, we referred to you, this would be great. And I have become kind of an environmentalist in my older ages. And I kind of looked at them and said, you know what? Personally, I don't believe in what they're doing, because they're kind of more a resource depleter than a resource gainer. And so I just basically said, thank you for the offer to do a proposal. I don't have enough time right now to take you on, but here are 3 people that you might want to talk to. So the best way to say no to a client, if it's not a good fit, is just say, I don't have the time to take you on, but here are some names of people that you might want to talk to. So you're paying it forward, but you're also not hurting yourself by doing that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say a simple, I'm not taking clients right now, and then doing a referral if you genuinely think it'll fit for somebody. If I don't feel it's going to be a good fit for anybody, I wouldn't refer them on in particular, but yeah.
I have an agency that gives me referrals every once in a while. It's one I used to work at, and they give me the crappiest referrals. It's like, so these are the bottom of the barrels that you're not going to take, that you can't think of anybody else to give to. You're sending it to me, and you're sending me things that that I don't work on. I don't do publicity. So so again, thank you for the referral, but I'm not taking clients right now.
I just wanted to add to that too. I hate saying no also. I'm terrible at it. So my go-to response is, that's really awesome. It looks like really cool work. And I do the yes and then I do the referrals. And that's where, again, this community plays such a huge role, and again, both local and national. And because again, for those of us that do refer, or when we get referrals, it's a really big compliment. And also it's actually a super important thing that also adds to your credibility as a solo. I do my best to refer the people that are perfect solution for the client or for the problem, which actually then reflects well on me. I'm again seen as I help connect and find solutions. So again, the wider your circle is, the more you know the talent, like in this call, who does what, who specializes in what is, and literally that I consider that to be part of my business strategy. So that I can direct, if a client comes to me with any question, again, I can help connect and solve for them. And it's not necessarily work for me, but it always reflects well on me. So it's about the no, make sure it's kind of it's a yes, and send them to somebody else that can do the work. And seriously, it will always be a good thing.
Yeah,
I would also,
you're a reliable resource with information that helps the client, and that's what you're doing. Helps others too, but when they see that, they remember that, particularly if it worked for them, they're going to remember you. I think that's a great piece of advice, Kathy, and another reason why networking is so important. Ava, I'm sorry that
so that's okay. I was gonna say that after if I get a referral that I end up doing work with, I always send the person who gave me the referral a gift, like a coffee card or whatever, to thank them for it. So they always keep me in mind as well as part of my business strategy, to pay back a little bit for the referrals.
Yeah.
So one of the thoughts I had in this conversation was, so my husband works at home and he likes to play video games, takes breaks to play video games. He's not here, so he doesn't know that. I'm telling you all this. But my sons are like, why aren't you working? Why aren't you working? And he's like, well, if I was at the office, I'd spend 3 hours bullshitting with people around the office. People stop by my cubicle, come in my office, meetings that I don't need. So I'm just reusing those 3 hours I gain to be relaxed. And I think that sticks with me because I think about, do you work straight through? You can work more efficiently as an independent and not have those extra hours that you spend at the office, water cooler, meetings, committee meetings, all that stuff. So I think you actually free yourself up to do more work, but you just need to make sure you balance what your workload is, because you don't really need to, unless you're really desperate for it, work 12 hours a day anymore, because you can work 8 hours a day and be more efficient than if you were to do 12.
Agreed. And your husband and my husband need to hang out because they're the same person, apparently. Yeah, he likes to play video games during his lunch breaks while working from home because it relaxes him. And I think this kind of feeds back to what somebody else had said before is, the thing about being a solo is that you do have the flexibility to, if you want to, I've heard walk the dog, exercise, take your kids to the bus stop. I mean, you can do all of that. And the one thing, I know for me, I get really, really frustrated when I hear about people doing the corporate grind who are working, more than 60 hours a week. And I don't know. I feel kind of sad for us as Americans that we do that because there aren't a lot of other, countries that do that, where we run ourselves into the ground with work. And I feel like, as again, solo provides the flexibility to say, these are the hours that I want to work. These are the things that are going on in my life. We've all talked about that. I had a family member who passed away recently. And gosh, it was so nice to be able to tell my clients, you know what, I need to step away, for a bit of time. And they all understood, and I was able to do that. Whereas in the corporate world, I think they still would have been emailing me, during a personal situation like that.
I think that's a great thing to take away some perhaps fear that folks may have over time. And I can't say it's perfect, but when you've developed a bank of clients and they really know you as people and they value you as people, and if they're good clients and they treat you like a person, when things happen in your life, a death or whatever it is, and I certainly learned it through this flexibility in this last year with this house fire, like the kindness that I saw from my clients and just saying, like, we're just releasing, just go do what you need to do. Just as I would have hoped if I was a corporate client, I realized that they were like, no, we're going to do that for you too, Amy, because we know you really, this is when you need it. And that was such a blessing. And it just made me that much more committed to my solo practice, to know that that kind of goodwill could be shared with me, even though I'm not an employee.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that, many of the clients I have, just the relationships, and I mean like friendships we have, are just as strong, if not stronger, than I ever had in corporate America. So this idea as a consultant that you're sort of this, kind of a vendor that they don't really care about, and over time, I know you are a valued core part of their team for many clients, and it can be every bit as sort of rewarding in terms of an interpersonal relationship as anything you have in corporate America, if not more so.
And I would add that now that the pandemic has happened, more people are working from home. And so the idea of being alone all the time is got broader context, and that people have strategies for that. And the idea that you're just not working with other people, you have these connections you have via Zoom, but also, I mean, I make a point to go to my clients' offices. This is pre-COVID, at least once a month. Just like when I was in an agency, we want to go there and spend face-to-face time, see where they work, see their office, talk about their kids, and use that time to connect with them. And when I did my Myers-Briggs profile, it showed that I'm an introvert, but I get energy from other people. So if I feel like really like I need energy, I go to a coffee shop, and just being around other people gives me that sense of energy. So you find out what works for you and what works best for you.
I do a lot of work with global clients, and so again, even when the pandemic hit, there to a certain extent there weren't a lot of changes in how I did what I did, but and so I just had two thoughts that I wanted to build on what Michael and Eva just said. One is I had one of my favorite clients, and one of my clients, I mean, she finally asked me, she says, Kathy, why are you a solo? Because I think they wanted to bring me on. And I said, no, don't, I said, I love being solo. And I kind of was listing all these different things. And she's like, oh, she never even looked at it that way. Again, I'm a small business, and again, I get to do what I do and help her do great work and support her in her work. And anyways, it was just this really kind of fun conversation. And I consider her to be a friend now too, even though she's also a client. But the other thing is that you all have a lot of talent in building community because of our communication skills. And again, what you end up doing is applying it to yourself in your own practice. How do you team build? Again, how do you reach out? And so I used to go into one of my clients as well, but I've kind of come up with other ways that tips and tricks from Zooming, frankly, on how do I build community? How do I get my energy? How do I share energy? There's lots of kind of best practice out there that, again, we as communicators should be on top of anyways. And I just apply it to my own business, and it helps a lot.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this. Has energized me to want to stay being a solo. We're putting together our career coffee list of topics for next year. So when you get the post-event survey, please share any feedback and other topics you think would be good to hear. Any questions you may have that we didn't answer in this conversation, and I'll share those with the group, and we can email you back with our responses. But again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you to everyone who took a Friday morning to be with us. And have a great weekend.